Hi everybody, here we are today in Logan in Hocking County. Now before you switch this and think, oh, this is just another post about Logan and Hocking County history, well, it's not entirely true. What this is something I've noticed about the Hocking River here at Logan that really has been going on all over the state of Ohio in creeks and rivers, and really this part of the United States, really all of 2019 so far. So I wanted to come out here because this place is not overly far from my house, and kind of walk you through what's going on and how this river, the Hocking River right here behind me, has changed in the recent weeks. Now, I'm standing on the bridge of State Route 93 between Logan and South Logan. And you may also see vehicles going behind me, and that's actually US 33. And if you continue on up that direction, you would eventually hit Rockbridge and Lancaster and so forth. So that kind of gives you an idea of where I'm at, but this area also is a very busy intersection in this area of Logan. So I'm going to try and talk over the vehicles and the traffic, and hopefully you can hear me. So let's go ahead and have a look at the riverbanks. And let me first point out this tree right here, if you notice, is actually leaning over into the river. That has just changed in the last couple of days. That was not leaning quite as bad just even when I was here about two days ago to scout this area and see if I could even do a video here. Or to make sure I could access this. So, but the main point of interest that I wanted to show you is this right here. You may notice how there is some trees that have kind of moved out into the river, or they appear to be there now, but they weren't there just a couple of weeks ago. When we had, you may recall, at the end of January, in the beginning of February, we had a lot of rain, and this rain came after a very strong freeze with sub-zero temperatures even for quite a length of time all over the state of Ohio. And actually, let's continue walking. I'll show you the river here, but I want to give you a closer look and kind of get out of the traffic, and I will kind of show you a closer viewpoint of what's going on, as I'm not trying to fall in all the slush that we just got this morning as well. So why is it then that this area kind of moved away from the riverbank and kind of settled right in the middle of the river? This kind of surprised me when I was driving by here a couple weeks ago, and I noticed that, and I thought, what's going on? Well, I'll tell you what's going on and what happened. That deep freeze that we got with the sub-zero temperatures froze the ground, which was already extremely saturated, and just froze, kind of like flash froze it. And so all the soil particles obviously froze as well, because that's what the ground and the soil was made up of, is small pieces of dirt, obviously. So what occurred is this freeze, once it was unthawed, and it was unthawed by rainwater, actually caused the ground to be more loose and cause more trees to come down. You may have noticed on back roads, or even in cities, any hillside, say, has really, there's more trees coming down, and the soil is so loose and wet, it's so oversaturated that nothing can hold on to it, so the gravity, or the force of gravity rather, is taking the trees down. But in this case, the soil washed into the water, into these creeks and rivers as it was draining off when we were getting all of this rain and unthawing it, thus making the water more dense. Now, or just heavier. And is what created this density is all of these little pieces of soil together within the water made it so much more thicker almost. And I noticed this when I was actually visiting the Hocking River at a different location during the flooding, and I noticed that there was little noise coming from the river. There was some rapids a little bit, but you couldn't really hear anything, and I thought that was very odd. Well, that was because the water is more dense. It was like a slushy kind of compound or mixture, and that's what was going on. There was so much moisture, or excuse me, there was so much soil in the water from where it had washed down and it had unthawed so rapidly. So as we can see here, it's really you can see how it's kind of eaten out, and kind of essentially that density of that water pushed this loose soil away and moved the ball of roots that are underneath the trees and what soil they're attached to, and pushed it through just the sheer force out into the river. And it obviously, because of the shape of it, which we can't see obviously because of the water and the river itself being full, but I would imagine that there would be like an egg-shaped ball of roots and soil underneath that. So what's going on is that water was so heavy and was moving at such an immense speed, and with all of that weight in it, it pushed that entire piece out into the away from the bank, and thus eroding that part of the river. Now, this is going on, as I said, all over the place. So, and this is actually a good example of how creeks and rivers change over time. You see, we don't notice it in our lifetimes usually, because it happens over really dozens and dozens, hundreds and even thousands of years, that rivers change shape, or creeks, and they're able to meander, which means that they zigzag. If you ever notice how sometimes you can kind of see where riverbanks over time, maybe from where you grew up and then you go back to a place, you may notice how maybe the riverbank, they're not quite the same. Well, that's because flooding, and when water, when the flood waters, especially this time of year, when so much soil washes down into them, they become more dense, and therefore they have more force, more power, and they reshape the banks of the river, taking trees out with it. And then once the trees get washed into it, the ball of roots underneath rips out more soil. So it just creates more and more change to the riverbanks, reshaping the river overall. So over time, what we may see, and actually this is Cackle-Mackerel Park behind me, or over on the other side of the river. Eventually, perhaps in my lifetime, but probably not, probably in the next generations of people that live in this area, may have to actually do something to the riverbank to keep it from eroding over into the edge of the park. So as we can see, this is an example of kind of how the physical geography of the land can change and warp over time because of freezing and thawing, flooding, and all of these components working together to reshape the landscape as a whole. So I hope you found this enlightening. I hope you found this interesting, and you could hear me throughout the entire thing. But just be on the lookout wherever you live, near a creek, stream, river, whatever it may be. Check out the riverbanks and see if you notice some change, because I bet that you will.